Greetings and salutations, my name is OJ as always, and welcome, or welcome back, to another episode in the DBDathon series of videos. A series of videos where I go over every single killer in Dead by Daylight from Trapper all the way up to the not so recently released Springtrap. I go over their lore, aka just reading their in-game bio, their power and gameplay, their teachable perks, as well as their design and my favourite / least favourite cosmetics for them. Like, comment and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and / or if you enjoy the video. And today's object of obsession is Sadako Yamamura, also known as the Onryo. Now, unlike most other licensed killers, Sadako actually has a decent chunk of lore that is there to read, unlike say someone like Pinhead who has like one paragraph. So with that said, her lore actually reads as such. A powerful and lethal Onryo, Sadako Yamamura was the daughter of a famed seer from Izu Oshima, Japan. Her mother left many questions unanswered. In her hometown, sailors disliked the way her mother would spend days on the beach, her eyes fixed on the foaming waves of the sea. Some said, "Frolic in brine, goblins be thine. If you keep playing in the water, the monster will come for you." 9 months later, Sadako was born. As a child, her immense powers seemed impossible to control and flared in anger. This became apparent when she was unable to control her rage during a public demonstration of her mother's power. When a journalist called her mother a fraud, Sadako's powers surged and the journalist collapsed on the floor, struck dead. Then, everything went wrong. Her mother passed away, and shortly after, Sadako was lured to an old, crumbling well. As she leaned over the rim, a long shadow fell over her. She turned, and a sudden jolt of pain hit her over the head, cracking it open. Her vision dimmed, and her mind swirled into unconsciousness. She felt 2 hands pushing her over the rim. Pain exploded in her skull as she hit the cold ground. A grinding noise came from above, and the well darkened, all light obscured like a midday eclipse. Every inch of her body screamed in pain. Looking up, she saw the only way out. She dug her nails into the muddy ground and slowly crawled towards a cobbled wall. She gripped the stones to climb, but had neither the strength nor the hold. Each time she clawed up a few inches, her nails slid against the wet wall and she slipped down. Her fingers gushed with blood as the coarse cobblestone tore off her nails and lacerated the flesh underneath. And yet she tried, again and again. Decades later, the meadow became a resort, and a log cabin was built above the well. When a visitor rented the cabin, Sadako found an opportunity for revenge. She summoned all of her Nesha power and projected a terrible curse on a videotape that killed its viewer after 7 days. Her wrath was like the tides of a stormy sea, violent and unforgiving. As she plunged into a fury, a dark fog coiled at her feet. The sound of crashing waves echoed through the old stone well. Suddenly, a tidal surge came crashing down on the cabin's walls, wrecking its logs into a torrent of mud and filth. The black current flooded the well underneath and swallowed Sadako at once. When she opened her eyes, she stood on a desolate beach, facing a vast, stormy ocean. A thick black fog caressed the water's surface. Sadako walked into the coming wave and slowly disappeared into the opaque fog. It's decent enough lore, right? Considering this is a licensed killer and every other licensed killer gets a basic summary of what happened to them and then it goes, "Ooh, fog come." This is better than the rest of them. Not great, it kind of just tells you what happened to her and how she ended up to be the woman or being, demon. Wow, words are really difficult. How she turned into the Onryo that she is now. But yeah, it's fine enough, it's decent enough. But this does give me the chance to just say, I don't really have much connection to the Ring film. It's one of those, I know what it is, I understand the rules and I understand what she does, but in terms of, I've never actually watched the film, and in terms of my actual connection to her, she's one of the ones I'm more like loosely connected with. I understand she's a horror icon, I can recognise that, I'm not doubting that in any way, shape or form, but I just don't have much personal attachment to her. I mean, she's iconic in all of her own right, do not get that wrong. Her look is very, very iconic, and her sort of ordeal with the tape and the 7 days thing is obviously very iconic in its own right as well. So iconic, in fact, that after you buy Sadako, or was his name Yuichi? I think that's the survivor's name that came alongside her. After 7 days, you actually do get a unique sort of animation that plays when you boot up the game, and it is, the classic her crawling out of the well and then walking towards the screen. I think that's really cool. That's a really, really cool way to implement the sort of rules of her existence, per se. You also get a charm after seeing it, which is obviously her climbing out of the well. But yeah, her lore is fine enough. It's way better than any other licensed killer we've talked about thus far, so I can't hate her for that. But yeah, I don't have too much connection to her, so don't expect some masterful critique, loving love letter to The Ring and Sadako. I don't really know too much about it. It's not going to be a nemesis situation, right? But anyways, with that said, let's move on to her power / her gameplay. Now, Sadako's power is split into, I would say, 2 halves. The sort of knockoff version of Wraith's ability and all of the stuff related to the TVs. When it comes to Wraith's knockoff ability, she, akin to Wraith, is able to enter a state of invisibility, quote unquote. Wraith's is an interesting one because obviously he is kind of visible. He's kind of like a wibbly wobbly state, whereas Sadako, from a certain distance away, is completely invisible to survivors. But as she draws closer to them, she kind of like flickers in and out of existence. Unlike Wraith, she is able to move at a normal speed when entering and exiting her sort of invisibility. And weirdly, I didn't know this until I was reading off like her perk descriptions on this website, she can't be stunned. Like, when she's invisible, she can't be stunned. But Wraith can, and has to sit there for 7 years being stunned. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. But yeah, this ability of undetectability, that's a word. It's basically to allow you to approach survivors easier, and it does a decent job at that. It's also obviously quite befitting of her to sort of flicker in and out of existence. It's fitting her. It's befitting of what she is, right? But the other half is in relation to the TVs. The TVs will spawn randomly throughout the trial. At the start of the trial, they are turned off, but will turn on after a certain amount of time. And TVs have an area of effect around them, which can apply a status known as Condemned. Condemned can only be applied, I think, when you are demanifested as Sadako, so invisible, and you crawl to a powered TV. So one that's not turned off by the VHS tapes, which survivors can use to turn off said TVs. When you use that projection ability to crawl through a TV, any survivor near a powered TV will receive a stack of Condemned. And she also gets a burst of movement speed, which, can help catch survivors off guard. If they're near a TV, of course. Now, Condemned will steadily stack up each time you teleport through a TV, as I said. And once it reaches 3 stacks, you can be it builds up. It's the white circle around their icons. So every time you build up a stack of Condemned, eventually you can get locked into a state of Condemned by being hooked. So if you say you have 3 stacks and she hooks you, then you are locked into 3 stacks. You can't go below 3 stacks. Then that can be done again at 6 stacks. And once a survivor reaches 7, they enter they have a red ring around their icon, and you'll get Killer Instinct on said survivor that reaches that state. When at that state, next you down them, you have the ability to use the inexorable stare. I think that's how you say that. It's basically a free Mori. You get to do a free Mori. That's what it is, right? You just stack up that stuff and then you get to do a free Mori. Simple as that. And that is kind of the gameplay loop of Sadako. I would like to admit, I am a person who plays as every single killer in the game on different occasions. So I'm not specifically really, really good at one killer. So if I miss any, sort of nitty-gritty details in relation to the killers and I get some things wrong, I do apologise to any that, main her. But that, to me, that is what the game plan is. To teleport as much as humanly possible, where applicable, and stack up Condemned as much as you can. And try to lock them in and then just, by the end of the game, just kind of kill them. Or not by the end of the game, just whenever you can, kill them. And yeah, that is basically her gameplay look. She gets a both stronger and weaker version of the Wraith's like invisibility, and she has some of the best map like pressure in the entire game. I know obviously you can turn off the TVs, but they still exist, and until you turn them off, well, not only by turning them off and getting like the tapes and stuff, you're wasting time that could be spent on other stuff. Even without turning them, she just has really good map control, because you can teleport damn near to any gen on the map that she feels like. And obviously the condemned stuff, if left unchecked, can be very, very potent. So yeah, I think her power is actually quite cool, and it's really fitting, if that makes sense. It feels like I'm playing as Sadako. I'm using the TVs to, kill people. And the fact that, by the way, it's 7 stacks in relation to the fact that it takes 7 days to kill someone from seeing the tape, I think that's a really neat little cherry on top. The little kind of reference per se. I think it's a very good adaptation of who she is into Dead by Daylight. You feel like you are playing as Sadako. You are showing yourself multiple times, 7 times if you want to get full stacks, and then killing them. That's quite befitting. And yeah, it's not like Nemesis. I'm never going to let that go. I'm never going to let that go. But yeah, I think her power and her gameplay as a whole is actually quite good and quite fun. I don't know how strong she is overall. She used to be really, really strong, because she was able to stack up Condemned really quickly and basically end games before they could even do a single gen, because she was just kill people before they could even do anything. But obviously those times are no longer with us, unless I'm tripping, and yeah, I think her gameplay's pretty good. So with that said, let us move on to her teachable perks. The first perk she has is known as Scourge Hook, Floods of Rage, with a description reading as such. You form a psychic connection with the entity and alter the rules of the trial. At the start of a trial, 4 random hooks are changed into Scourge Hooks. You see their auras in white, just like every other Scourge Hook perk. When a survivor is unhooked from a Scourge Hook, all other survivors will have their auras revealed for 5, 6, or 7 seconds. Doesn't have any flavor text, unfortunately. This is a combo perk. On its own, it's not particularly very strong, right? Using this perk on its own, you're not really getting anything out of it, because there's no reason to hook a survivor on a Scourge Hook outside of that 7-second aura read, right? However, if you combined it with other Scourge Hook perks, such as Scourge Hook Pain Resonance, the one from what is their face? Houndmaster. The one where you can hook survivors on normal hooks, and when they're unhooked, they become Scourge Hooks. You can just, by combining this perk with other Scourge Hooks, you're able to just create this big interconnected web where just putting a survivor onto a single Scourge Hook suddenly does all of this stuff all at once. Like, you can run Pain Resonance, the one from Pinhead, which makes it so they get mangled and hemorrhage after getting unhooked. So they're getting unhooked, getting mangled and hemorrhage for 90 seconds, everyone's aura is revealed for 7 seconds, and say you accidentally or had to hook them on a normal hook, with the Houndmaster perk, bang, that's a Scourge Hook for later use. You got Pain Resonance, wow, you just blew up a gen whilst you're at it. It's a perk that doesn't work very well on its own, but in tangent with others, it's very solid. It's a good information perk. Nothing crazy, but pretty good. And yeah, I'm quite fond of it. I like using it in Scourge Hook builds, as I just said. And yeah, it's a pretty good perk. So with that said, let's move on to our second perk. Said second perk is known as Call of Brine, with a description reading as such. Your psychic abilities influence technology in devastating ways. After damaging a generator, this perk becomes active for 70 seconds. The generator regresses at 130, 140, or 150% of the normal regression speed, and you can see its aura in yellow. Each time a survivor completes a good skill check on a generator affected by this perk, you receive a loud noise notification. Now, this perk is very, very, very infamous. It was one of the key players in the gen kicking build, a build that ruined everyone's day, survivors and killers alike, because here's the fun fact. The gen kicking build wasn't particularly fun to use, nor was it very fun to go against, and this was a key component of it. The 150% gen regression is a lot, and you could combine it, I believe, with Overcharge, which stacks it up to, I think, 185% regression speed, which is very, very quick, as you could imagine. It's a perk that nowadays is still pretty decent, but yeah, it used to be an absolute menace, a despicable menace. I think it was used in the ever so infamous chess merchant build, or the chess merchant game. I'm sure you know what I'm on about if you've been around in the community since Skull Merchants edition. I can't wait to talk about her, not for the right reasons, but or for the I'll let you see what it is when we get to there, right? But yeah, this perk is pretty good. Nowadays it's pretty decent, right? And it can be combined with other gen kicking builds or gen kicking perks like Dragon's Grip or Oppression or Overcharge still, but it's obviously not the menace to society that it once was. But either way, it's still pretty good. I would suggest it if you ever wanted to do a gen kicking build, per se. Per se? Why am I throwing per se on the end of that? Anyways, with that said, let's move on to her third perk. Said third perk is known as Merciless Storm, with a description reading as such. Your horrible trauma is felt by everyone. When a generator reaches 90% progression, survivors working on that generator will be faced with continuous skill checks. If they miss or stop repairing the generator, it will be blocked by the entity for 16, 18 or 20 seconds. Merciless Storm can only trigger once per generator per trial. Now, this perk has very niche uses and is okay. Its niche use is found in impossible skill check doctor builds, because being assaulted by rapid skill checks that appear all over your screen and have tiny little sort of success sections is quite a problem. And it obviously then, if you fail any of them, you get blocked for 20 seconds. The only thing is, it can only be activated once per gen, which isn't particularly great. I understand why, but it's not great for this perk. And it's only 20 seconds, which also isn't great. I mean, I'm sorry. Deadman's Switch can be, like, activated for 50 seconds just by hooking another survivor. That's almost triple the length of this perk, and I would argue that its condition is probably easier to fulfill. Getting someone off of a gen after hooking someone with a decent amount of time to do it is easier than, you know, letting something progress to 90%, and obviously it can just be countered by being good at the game. If a survivor is good enough, they will just hit every skill check, and then the perk doesn't get any value on that gen. So it can kind of end up useless if you're against really good survivors, or just people who are good at skill checks. That's obviously why it's used on Doctor mostly, because he can make the skill checks as difficult as possible. But yeah, otherwise this perk is pretty fine. I have no issues with it, and funny enough, I believe it's one of the few perks in this game that's never received any changes, which is quite surprising, at least on live servers. Well, since its release on live servers. But anyways, with that said, let's move on to her design, as well as my favourite and least favourite cosmetics. Now, as I do in all of these licensed killer videos, I must give all of my props to the people that originally designed the licensed character in question, as, you know, they're the guys that originally designed the design that I'm about to give my compliments to. With that said, Sadako's original design is damn near perfect. It is very, very, very good. There is a reason why she's basically the textbook creepy ghost girl. Like, she has been referenced in so much stuff across all of the years since she was, like, first in a film. It's insane. She is iconic in all the right ways. Like, icon. She is an icon. The crawling out of TV stuff, the long white sort of gown, the very, very pale skin, and obviously I would be remiss if I didn't mention the hair in front of the face. That's what is the most iconic part of her after all. And as well, I will give props to the fact that she has a creepy jump scare in the lobby. That can kind of fall into the design section, right, where she just appears right in front of the screen with the eyeball right in your face. Like, she is iconic, and I don't think I need to justify why. It is just, I'm sure you know, I'm sure your mum knows, I'm sure your dad knows. She is an icon. She is iconic. You show someone a picture of a ghost girl with long hair crawling out of TV. Everyone knows it's Sadako. Immediately, they might not know her name, but they'll recognize it. And yeah, her design is very, very good, and props goes to anyone or all of the people that originally designed her, though I may not know who those people are. With that said, let's move on to my favourite and least favourite cosmetics for her. Now, usually I would go on a long spiel about how I pick my favourite and least favourite skins, and for anyone wondering, least favourites can't be anything below very rare, favourites can be whatever. However, Sadako only has 3 skins, so my choices aren't particularly very difficult, right? And when it comes to least favourites, I would have to say my least favourite is Rotten Remains. This is a legendary skin, and I don't think it really deserves its title, outside of a few extra sound effects of like hearing the bones clicking and a bit of like that weird green gunk dripping. The skin isn't really too much to write home about. It doesn't deserve its legendary title, in my opinion, of course. But as a skin on its own, I think it's actually quite good. It shows like what her body would have looked like in the well for that long amount of time. It is sort of just Sadako's normal design, but she's missing a lot of her hair. Her face looks more skeletal. Her body in general is more skeletal. Her right arm is literally, nothing but bone. It's a good skin. I've got no problems with it. I've just always thought it was a bit weird that it was a legendary, considering that the only real added features is like a few whispers and like a few sound effects in the background that are barely noticeable to people that do have or have bad ears. I've got bad ears, so I can't notice some of these like more hidden sound effects and stuff. But anyways, I think it's a good skin. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but it's just my least favorite. That's what these videos are. Personal opinion pieces. Opinion pieces? Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, instead of pieces, Anyways, with that said, let's move on to my favorite skin for her. Now, this probably doesn't come as a shock to anyone that watched my video on the Spirit, but my favourite skin for Sadako is Deadly Equinox. Wow, this skin is gorgeous. I've forgotten the name of the flower again. It's a red flower that signifies death in sort of, I don't think it's Japanese. I don't think it's just Japanese. I see it in a lot of Japanese media. I remember seeing it in Persona 3, specifically the intro to episode Aegis, the DLC for Persona 3 Reload. This flower is meant to signify death, so having, Sadako be covered head to toe in the flower's sort of aesthetic, and actually the flower itself, is very befitting, and it is very, very pretty. I am very fond of how the flower, like the dress that she wears or the gown that she wears, kind of just spreads out to be the flower. I'm very fond of the fact that on her face the flower is kind of just sprouting from her mouth. It's like this weird depiction of the idea that she's been in that well for so long that the flower that represents death has actually grown on her body, both in signification to her own death and the death that she brings to others. It's a very, very cool way of incorporating that flower into her design, and it's a very, very, very good skin and very pretty at the same time. But yeah, with all of that said, we're already at the end of the video, even though, I've been talking for 23 minutes now. Sadako's pretty cool. I've got no qualms with her. I'm just not particularly personally very attached to her. But anyways, I hope you have a lovely evening, afternoon, morning, etc. As I said in the beginning, like, comment, subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and especially so if you've made it this far. It means you like listening to my voice. At least I would hope so. Don't know why you would watch this long if you didn't. And the next video in this lovely series will be on a personal favourite of mine, none other than the Dredge.